Exercise 9.8. Simplify. Okay, now these are the numbers under the radical sign. There are some rules that I need to discuss. First of all, like for example, we have got a number square root x and another number square root y. When these are written as separate radical signs, so we can combine them under a single radical sign, radical of or square root of x times y. Similarly, there is a number x that is to be multiplied with itself. So that could be written as, using this rule 1, x times x. This would be square root of x square, and since you know that the value of the square root is 1 by 2, so this will be x square whole raised to the power 1 by 2. When a number has got two powers, you know this rule as well. A number has got two powers, then both the powers are going to be multiplied, n times m. So that rule will be applied here. X has now two powers, 2 and 1 by 2. So both of them are going to be multiplied. X raised to power 2 times 1 by 2. So this gets cancelled out. So final answer is x. So in short, the product of the radical of the same number, that yields the number x. And the third rule is going to be, whenever you have got two numbers under the radical sign that are being divided, so we can combine them under the same radical sign, x divided by y. Okay, now with these rules, let me start part A. So we can combine 7 and 5 under a single radical sign, that will be square root of 35. Now since uh, these two numbers 7 and 5 are the prime numbers, and none of them is occurring as a pair like 7 square or 5 square, so this is going to be the answer, radical 35. Okay, had it been like for example 7 square, so we could have cancelled this square with the square root sign, or had it been 5 square, we could have cancelled this square with the square root sign as well. So since in this case none of these is the case, so we retain the answer like this. Okay, now for part B, again we are going to do it like the same way, 3 times 11 under the same radical sign, and this is going to be radical 33. Then for part C, 6 times radical 3 times 4 times radical 2. Let me multiply these first, that is going to be 24, and then I'm left with radical 3 times radical 2. So now we can combine these radicals under the same or single radical, that gives radical 6. So that will be the answer. In part D, 9 times radical 10 and radical 3 combined under the single radical sign, that will give us 30. And now let's have the prime factorization of 30. 2 15s are, 3 5s are, and 5 1s are. You see, neither 2 nor 3 or even 5, none of them is occurring as a pair. All of these prime numbers 2 3 and 5 are occurring once, so there is no point to write this as radical 2 times radical 3 times radical 5. So it's better to write it like this, so that gives us the final answer, 9 times radical 30. I've just shown it like, if you have the prime factorization of this 30, even then none of the prime numbers is occurring as a pair, so that's why we retain the answer like this. Okay, In part E now, this is to be done exactly the same way. This negative 2 is to be multiplied with this 2. That will give me negative 4. Then 5 times 6. So radical 30 would be the same as was the case in part D. So that is the answer to part E. Now for part F, 9 times, now for this, square root 6 times square root 6. This rule is going to be applied. The radical of the same number multiplied with itself. So that is going to be radical 6 times raised to power 2. So we can have 9 times 6, that is 54. That is its answer. Okay, now part G. This 2 is to be multiplied with this 3 to give 6, and then radical 3 times radical 2. We can combine them under the single radical sign. So this is 6 times radical 6. And that is its answer. For part H, 2 times radical 3 times radical 6, that is radical 18. Now for 18, what I need to do, I have to have its prime factorization. And now you can see a prime number 3 has got a square of it. So we can write it down as 2 times 2 times 3 square. And now we split the square root sign, radical 2 and then radical of 3 square. Cancelling this square with this square root sign, that is going to be only 3. So now let's multiply this 2 with this 3, that is 6 times radical 2. Now you have observed that when we have got a pair of a number under the radical sign, the square root sign of that number gets cancelled out like this. So that comes out of the square root sign, so gets multiplied with this 2 to give the answer 6 times radical 2. Okay, now for part I, negative 4 is to be multiplied by negative 1. Let me do it like this. Negative 4 times negative 1, and then this radical 2 will be multiplied with this radical 5. Radical 2 times 5 written under a single radical sign. So this negative 4 times negative 1 will give me positive 4 and then radical 10. So now since the prime factorization of 10 is the same 2 times 5, none of the prime factors 2 or 5 is going to be having a pair. So we will retain the answer like 4 times radical 10. That completes all the parts of question number 1. Now it's question number 2. Simplify. When we need to simplify them, for part A, we can have 14 divided by 7 written under a single radical sign. Now, first of all, we would be doing the simplification as much as possible. So this gives us 7 ones are 7, 2s are. So giving the answer radical 2. Same goes for part B, writing 24 and 4 under the same radical sign. This is radical 6 and that is its answer. For part C, negative is outside the radical sign and then 30 divided by 3, giving us the answer negative times radical 10. Okay, then it is part D. Now, when we start part D, I need to clarify a concept that whenever there is a radical sign in a fraction in the denominator, so we rationalize. That means we balance out this radical sign so that no surd is there in the denominator. The method is known as the rationalization. But in this case, first of all, let me write down this as the fraction of a same or single denominator, radical 1 by 2, and this can be simplified as radical 1 and then radical 2. And then since we know that radical 1 is 1 and in the denominator this is radical 2. Now there is a surd in the denominator, so we do it like this: rationalization, radical 2 times radical 2. This is the rationalizing step. Okay, what is its benefit? Let me tell you. The numerators get multiplied and denominators get multiplied. Okay, that will give us now 1 times radical 2 is radical 2, and for this radical 2 being multiplied with itself, so square of it, so square gets cancelled out with this square root sign. This is radical 2 divided by 2. Now you see there is no surd in the denominator as was the case in the start of the question, so that gives us the answer to part D. Okay, for part E now, square root of 15, and square root of 15 is going to be its final answer, like 3 ones are 3 15s are. Okay, then for part F, that is writing these two under the same radical sign, that gives me radical 1 by 9, and then splitting this radical 1 and then radical 9, that will be like this: 1 times 3. So this is how these questions are to be done.